Welcome in. It is Big Ten today. Great to have you with us, Dave Revson, Dave Wannstedst. We're inside 10 days.
You know what? I was looking forward to coming just to hear your intro. You know, I love it. Yeah. You let me do that one time.
I did last year. Yeah, you're free to do it any week you want. We've got a big season ahead of us.
Yeah,
We've got every Tuesday, which I'm looking forward to. You can be the designated now man on Tuesdays if that's.
I've got enough problem keeping track of it.
Where are we going next? I think we all know what our big story is today. And there is some big news, and again, it's been percolating for a while now, but Michigan announcing yesterday that it has self-imposed a 3-game suspension on head coach Jim Harbaugh to start the season. This after the NCAA Committee on Infractions had rejected a negotiated 4-game settlement. It all stems from allegations of recruiting violations within the program. Harbaugh will be with the team during the suspension. It simply means he cannot coach on game day. A.D. Ward Manuel issued a statement yesterday saying, quote, while the ongoing NCAA matter continues through the NCAA process, today's announcement is our way of addressing mistakes that our department has agreed to in an attempt to further that process. We will continue to support Coach Harbaugh, his staff, and our outstanding student athletes. Per the NCAA's guidelines, we cannot comment further until the matter is resolved. You see the 3 games Harbaugh will miss. Home contests against East Carolina, UNLV, and Bowling Green. Don't figure to be particularly challenging for a team that's a 2-time defending conference champ, the preseason favorite. He'll return for that game September 23rd against Rutgers. And Wani, this all seems like a way for Michigan to mitigate further punishment a little bit. If the 4 games were rejected, the assumption would be maybe to be a little more than that.
Right.
And so here, if you already served 3, then maybe you go into kind of a renegotiation process here with the NCAA, and perhaps there's some more down the line. And we'll get into that, and who knows how it's going to play out. But that being said, sitting out the first 3 games of this year, what does it mean? How does it impact the team?
Well, I think the key is, when you read the penalty, being able to be at practice is the key. I mean, it's not going to be a matter of who's going to motivate this team. If Jim's gone all week, now, who's going to be designated and how are we going to go about making sure that we, cross the T's and dot the I's to be ready, because anyone can beat us. We know that. But Jim's going to beat her. I'm sure they'll have their team meeting on Friday night, and then he'll be gone. He won't be at the game. So the message, the theme will be there all week long. What has to happen on game day, but I used to do this naturally. Situations are the biggest thing he's going to have to depend on his assistant coaches. And by that, I mean, like we would always talk as a staff, okay, the first time it's 4th and 1 on the goal line. Are we going for it, or are we going to kick the field goal? Some of these things you talk about in advance. Anytime, if you were my offense coordinator, I'd walk by you in the hall getting
You'd have problems.
I've had problems. Okay. And I'd walk by you at the coffee machine and say, Rever, we're 4th and 5 at the 50-yard line. What do you got? And I would do this with my coaches, the same thing. Because 1, I wanted them thinking about it, but 2, I wanted to know what they were thinking. So 1, you want to cover these situations as much as you can leading up to the game so that we're on the same page or close to it. The second thing is player substitution, or if a running back is in and God forbid, puts the ball on the ground 3 times, are you gonna take him out of the game and put the next guy in? How are you going to rotate your defensive linemen? I always wanted, as an example, my keep those guys fresh. So right before the half, right at the end of the game, I want my first team pass rushers to be in there. So you can rotate. Some of these defensive line coaches just start rolling guys. All of a sudden, you need them at the end for a 2-minute drill. They're exhausted on the sideline. These are little things that you need to talk through ahead of time. Substitutions with players, same thing on special teams, and situations. But the rest of it really is, I wouldn't even worry about halftime. You go in, offense, do your thing, defense, do yours. Before the game, offense, do your thing, defense, do yours. Jim will cover all that stuff during the week.
And again, we're talking about 3 games that you would assume they have a great chance of winning.
You're talking to a coach.
I know coaches don't want to go there. But
you can talk to your wife and them about like that. No, I'm a coach. No. I'm not falling for that trap.
I hear you. 13 wins last year, school record. I'd be astonished if they're not 3-0 when Jim Harbaugh comes back. But I understand. I get it. And again, I think your point is there are so many things that go into game day that maybe the rest of us don't always understand, and it's impossible to cover every single scenario. So it's to say it would be exactly the same.
When do you want to go for two? Right? Yeah. I mean, I talked to him about it, but now we're in the heat of the game. You got to make a decision.
Right.
Penalties. Do we refuse it? Do we move them back? Or do we refuse the penalty, or do we move them back? I mean, little things like that.
I think what you're saying is there are some things that are rules of thumb, and then there's some things that are feel.
Yep.
The rules of thumb you can get through. The stuff that's feel that you do in the heat of the moment as a coach, clearly you can't replicate. And so we'll see how it impacts him. Let's turn the page. The games do start next week. Lots of fascinating storylines. First game of the season, Thursday night in primetime on Fox, Nebraska, Minnesota tangling. All 5 of the ranked Big Ten teams play Saturday. Michigan, Iowa, Ohio State, Wisconsin, Penn State. Sunday game as well, Northwestern and Rutgers. I want to pick your brain, Wani, on some of the coaches heading into these 2 earliest contests. So let's look at Thursday and Friday. And, of course, we have time to cover all these games between now and kickoff coming up next weekend. But let's start with Nebraska and Minnesota. It's the first game for Matt Rule. It clearly is not an easy one against what was a really good Minnesota team and what, frankly, has become a really good Minnesota program. I mean, P.J. Fleck has done such a good job there. You're Matt Rule. There's so many expectations, so many hopes around what your program's going to be. You've got 2 road games to start off, right? You're at Minnesota, at Colorado, and what will be a heavily hyped game as well. What do you want to check off your list between now and when you kick things off against the Gophers?
Well, I do like what Matt Rule did by naming his starting quarterback, right? They're coming out and saying, okay, Jeff Sims is my quarterback. Knowing what Jeff Sims can do, I remember watching him in the ACC when he was at Georgia Tech. He was a 4-star recruit coming out. So everybody likes to think of him as a runner, but he had some success throwing the football. So I like that decision because at least Matt Rule, you go into an opening game on the road, you don't want to be thinking of with the crowd noise and everything that's going to be happening there, rotating quarterbacks. That's a bad thing. It affects your entire team. So I like what Matt did right there. Everywhere else, I mean, he's building up. There's a lot of guys from graduations to transfer portals. So he's dealing with that the best he can right now. But I'll tell you what the key is. The key is, I always thought the first 3 games of the season, special teams, you say, how can we make an edge in this thing? And it would be the special teams play. Now, the problem here, you're playing a Minnesota team, right? That's got 2 of their top 3 receivers coming back. They've got transferred. I think PJ must still. They signed 3 kids from Western.
Western Michigan is like the farm team.
They just keep coming. I mean, so they've got their quarterback who played last year when Tanner Morgan got hurt some. Athan at least came in the game and he got some game experience, so they know what he can do. And PJ Fleck's background is special teams. So I think they're going to be well prepared. I think this is going to be a tough one for Nebraska, but Matt Rule has been here before. He has been here before. I've known Matt since he was coaching at Temple when I was at Pitt. And he's got a good plan. He's got a good group of assistants. He doesn't have to spend time coaching the coaches, as we say. Everybody's on the same page. So they'll close the gap a lot quicker. And they've got a quarterback that can make things happen. He really can.
It would be nice from their perspective to not start with a conference game and then not start with a Power 5 game on the road against a team that has a lot of hype, has a lot of transition themselves. Colorado has turned over the roster, as has been well documented, perhaps more so than any program in the country.
I just thought of a point, too. And, you just said, because when you bring in the new players, whether they were on the team, Nebraska before, with Scott Frost, or their transfer portal guys coming in, or they're freshmen. So you're looking at new players. And without having preseason games, to your point, you play a couple preseason games in the NFL and you get a chance to say, oh, you know what? He really looked good in shorts when when the lights didn't come on. But boy, under the pressure, I kind of like him better. And I think this might be the best combination. You don't get that in college. You line up, you play for real right from the beginning. that makes it a little bit tougher.
I think especially when you're a first-year head coach.
Absolutely.
You'd love to have that. We talked a little bit about P.J. Fleck. His roster turned over a lot, too, and you mentioned went into the portal and did get some really good players, a number of them, as you mentioned, from Western Michigan, but really all over the map. I just think as I look at Minnesota and kind of where they are now, the 9-win seasons that they've turned in under P.J. Fleck, I think you have kind of gotten to the point with them where they get the benefit of the doubt every year. They're going to be good. He's going to have them well prepared. He's gotten into a nice defensive rhythm now. It feels like they're going to have a strong defense year in and year out. Is there an area that you'd be focused on for him? You mentioned Kaliakmanis, the new starting quarterback, but again, he got some experience last year. What's your focus for Fleck?
Yeah, I that would be the thing that in a game like this, you don't want to go in and try to do too much, even though Kaliakmanis has played some. You don't want to go in there and put too much on his plate early. So this is right down P.J. Fleck's alley. I mean, when you think of programs, you say, I know what Iowa's going to do to win, and they win. Well, Minnesota's in that same mold now. For years we knew what Wisconsin was going to do to win. And now I think you can look at a Minnesota team. They're going to run the ball good. They're going to do that, and they're going to play defense. The thing about their defense, and then I'll get off it. I've spent a couple of days up there with those guys, and it is sophisticated. And so the guys that come through that program, they understand the defense, and they're able to make the adjustments. So. Minnesota is solid. I think, they got the best personnel they can get, but they are solid from a coaching and a system standpoint, offense, defense, special team. They're not going to beat themselves.
And last year when they did lose, they kind of did, right? I mean, so turnovers -5 in the games they lost, +10 in the games they won. So that's what you're hoping for.
Correct. And in the first game, that didn't happen.
Right.
Those things make you nervous.
Right.
God, the first extra point, I remember there, God, I hope, and we did like 6 weeks worth of extra points, and it was not a problem. But the first one is for real, or the first punt, you're like, oh, come on, please get it back, Got to
make the routine plays routine.
Yeah, that's exactly
That's what you try to do in the opener. But it'll be interesting, Kaliakmanis, little bit of turnover issues last year, so maybe that's somewhere where Nebraska says, man, maybe we can get something done here. What about Friday? Mel Tucker, Michigan State, a 6-win decline last year, was tied for the largest in FBS. So you had the great year 2 years ago that I think was somewhat unexpected, and then fell back last year. What does he need to prove, or his team?
He needs to bounce. He needs to bounce back. 2 years ago when he had the big year, I think they signed 15 transfer portals. Well, this year they got 14, so it's about the same number. The indecision, you hate when Peyton Thorne transfers out and Coleman transfers out, and they lose Reed to the NFL. I mean, they lost some firepower, and they lost some leadership in that locker room. So I just hope that Mel can make the decision between Hauser and Kim, the 2 quarterback battles. Right now, he hasn't said anything, but I think the quicker that he can make a decision there, stability is the key. When you lose a starting quarterback that had a lot of success in the past and two of your best receivers, in my mind, you need stability. And I think the quicker he can make a decision on the quarterback, and then you got to go out and win. You got to go out and win and go from there, because they don't have an easy schedule. The schedule this year, I think the team will be a little better this year, but the schedule is going to be tougher if you look at the schedule compared to last year.
Little easier off the top, though, right? Little easier at the beginning.
Week 1.
First couple weeks, you feel like maybe you can get yourself a little bit of momentum, but you make the point, and Kim and Hauser have combined to throw 21 passes in their career.
Yeah.
So, I assume that makes you nervous as a coach, even if you believe in both of them.
I'm nervous on extra points. Then alone trying to make a decision on a quarterback. I agree with you.
The most telling thing in being around coaches in this business has been you guys are nervous about everything.
We are. We are.
Well, the livelihood.
Pre-game meal. Is someone going to show up and tape ankles?
Back on Big Ten today, our big stat focusing on volleyball. Minnesota returning the reigning Big Ten Player of the Year in Taylor Landfair. Gophers have dominated this award of late. 4 of the last 5 winners playing for the Maroon and Gold. Landfair, of course, with a new coach this year. He is today's big interview, the man in charge of the Gophers, Keegan Cook. He joins us now from Minneapolis. Coach, I want to start with this. You had a great job. You were at a program in Washington that you had taken to the Final Four, a program that's nationally ranked every year, one that's going to be joining the Big Ten this season from now, although you didn't know that at the time. What was so appealing about Minnesota that you decided to leave what was a great situation in Seattle?
Yeah, like you said, didn't see it coming. I think that happens a lot in life. What struck me was just the responsibility of the opportunity, following 2 coaches, Hugh McCutcheon especially, but Mike Hebert as well. Just a program that has meant so much to the sport of volleyball and had such continued success. I thought, they got to get this right. And the more I thought about it, I thought, well, who's going to take that job? And unfortunately, as I reflected, I realized, it might be me. It might be my time to take that responsibility.
Well, you mentioned Hugh McCutcheon, who did an amazing job. I thought one parallel that was really interesting for me was you had a similar situation when you took over at Washington. Like a lot of people take over a program because the previous coach was unsuccessful or was fired. Clearly not the case either place. Jim McLaughlin did an amazing job at Washington. Now you're succeeding Hugh McCutcheon at Minnesota. Help me understand the similarities there, and maybe if you have some sort of a blueprint that clearly worked at Washington for situations like this.
Yeah, strange niche to occupy here. Not one I would recommend for everyone, but one I'm certainly grateful for. I think the biggest thing I've thought about is just seeking to understand before being understood is just a principle that I think helps a lot in transitions. Asking a lot of questions from a place of curiosity, not from judgment. Making sure that you're making intentional changes, that you're being selective about what you install too early, and then also just involving the players. I think that helps in a really uncertain time for them, to give them some autonomy in how they want to move forward.
In what ways have you given them autonomy?
Yeah, besides, I don't know, they picked most of my recruiting outfits these days. They said I needed some help there. But I don't know, just some nominal choices, practice times, meal times, just trying to get feedback quite a bit from them about how things are going, being flexible. I think those are I don't know, best practices that I would advise to anybody who's making a transition from one program to another, particularly one that's had success.
I need to know more about the outfits. I mean, what was the change that you instituted?
Yeah, Taylor Landfair let me know that my shoes were pretty subpar, so she's been sending me pictures, and her and my wife are working together to get things at a championship standard.
You mentioned Taylor Landfair, and we said coming off the top there, she's the reigning Big Ten Player of the Year, and so I would think that your first task, or very early on your list of tasks, was convincing her to stay. What was your pitch? How did you keep Taylor Landfair in Minneapolis?
She had a passion for Minnesota. You know, she made that pretty public early on, and I think my strategy was I flew to her home and met her family and shared with them my coaching philosophy and values. And shared some of the vision for the players that we were looking to add to the program in the near future, and was tried to be sincere and accurate to who I am. And as the spring has gone on and we moved into the summer, just the conversations have been even better and better. Coaching her has gotten more and more fun and productive, and so yeah, what a great leader she is becoming and was during that transition.
So you get the Player of the Year back. You also get the Defensive Player of the Year in the conference to transfer over, and Kylie Murr, who was at Ohio State. Strange situation there with the scholarship. She's available in the portal. What was the sell there, and how important might that have been, as you were mentioning, kind of talking to Taylor about, well, who's out there and who might we add? Was there kind of a symbiosis there?
Yeah, it was a must-get player the first week on the job is what I would say. As a staff, it was her official visit was our first week, and we thought we need to send a message that this program's in a great place and that we're moving forward. And Kylie's addition was a big part of that. And I think once we started there and she decided to join us, then we started making progress pretty quickly. But thrilled to have her. Great relationship with Melanie Schaffmaster. Tremendous leader already, and someone that I've just loved coaching here in the early days.
One thing that really interests me is that Coach McCutcheon is still involved in the program. He's an assistant athletic director. Help me understand that relationship and to what extent you have been working with him versus for him or versus just kind of doing your own thing.
Yeah, I think his quote to me was, "Come find me in my office. I'm not going to walk into yours, but I'm here for you at any moment." And he certainly has lived that from day one. Probably see him on a monthly basis and ask him some questions that maybe he would only have the answers to, whether that be institutional knowledge or just coaching in general. It's a role that I think more universities should be adding. I had it at Washington with Chris Peterson, and just that mentorship from someone who's been in it. I think you'd see a lot more success from young coaches and coaches in transition if universities were as forward-thinking as Minnesota with that position.
I want to get a little bit into your background because I just think it's a really interesting one. You're from California. You fell in love with volleyball watching your sister play the sport. Like, explain kind of what it was that grabbed you about volleyball.
Yeah, younger siblings get dragged to tournaments, and I think every younger sibling thinks they're better than their older sibling, which I certainly thought. And I wasn't. She was a Division I player, and my place in the game was quickly on the sideline as opposed to on the court as an elite athlete. But, she was a large influence for me. She was my first boss, got me my first coaching job. I worked for her for 10 years, at a club. I'd work all day at St. Mary's College. I'd work all night at her volleyball club. And I was getting incredible experience head coaching. I didn't even know it. I was fortunate to be gaining experience that I wish more coaches had these days.
You were talking about your time at St. Mary's. It started when you were an undergraduate. Explain your role as what it seemed like was kind of a student manager slash coach slash analytics guy. I mean, what was the role there?
Yeah, I was a math major, although I would claim to be more of an arithmetic major, according to my professors. But, I joined the program with a really established head coach, Rob Browning, who came from the USA Olympic team. And he handed me an early version of an analytics program that's now industry standard. He said, "Here you go, figure it out." And that was where I started to have an eye for the game and watching film and doing all the things that we have full-time positions for now. I didn't know it at the time, but what a gift it was to see the game through that lens as a young coach.
Interesting to me that you have a background in math, or as you say, in arithmetic. But either way, analytics are such a huge part of sports now. I mean, I think it's been one of the sea changes here over the last 15, 20 years. How big a role do analytics still play in your coaching, in your programs?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. One, I think it helps coaches to understand what they're seeing and to make objective decisions and to track growth. Athletes are really excited when they can see improvement. It's hard to see improvement at this level. The gains are incremental, and I think analytics and film give us a little insight into that to show them. I think the hard part is just, can you tell a story from the information? And I think coaches have more information than they need now more than ever. But can you translate it to the team? Can you tell a story that will actually influence them in a meaningful way? And I'd like to think that that's been something that I've been good at in my time as a head coach.
We had a lot of success, obviously, in Washington. I think it's really interesting that you're coming from Washington. Obviously, Washington is going to be coming into the Big Ten, along with Oregon and USC and UCLA. So you're going to have familiarity with this expanded portion of the Big Ten. I was talking about this yesterday with Kelly Sheffield, but for people maybe who don't follow West Coast volleyball as closely, give them a sense for what the Big Ten is getting here volleyball-wise.
Yeah, 4 of the top volleyball programs. If you had asked us to pick which universities to join the Big Ten, those 4 would have been right at the top of the list. And so you took 4 storied powerhouse programs with national championship experience and bring them into a league that was already leading the country. And you create a lot of excitement for fans and athletes and a lot of anxiety for coaches, I think, is what we just accomplished in a very short period of time.
Coach, I want to leave you with this. You might have a little anxiety when you look at the schedule coming up here. You guys have TCU and Baylor, of course, this week. The Big 10, Big 12 Challenge could be here on the Big 10 Network. You have Texas next week, #1 team in the country, also on the Big 10 Network. I was looking through, you have 5 straight, I think top 15 games on your schedule. What do you hope to learn about your team here early on?
Yeah, what does it take to win a national championship? I mean, that's what you want to know at the end of this non-conference. You'll certainly see some national contenders in conference, but you don't want to show up in December and be surprised. And that was the mindset around the preseason schedule. Learn fast and be ready to go once Big Ten play rolls around. So a little self-induced anxiety there, but I'm thrilled for our players and our fans to see what this team can do against the quality opponents we've set up.
We've had a lot of anxiety conversations here in the last minute or so. So, Coach, I'll let you simmer down. I won't ask you anything else to make you anxious, but really, really appreciate you coming on. Welcome to the Big Ten. Really great to have you. Keegan Cook, very much appreciate your time.
Dave, thanks so much for this. Appreciate it.
We are back on Big Ten today. Had a lot of Big Ten teams creating a lot of havoc up front last year. Led by Penn State, 43 sacks, the most in the league, 6th most nationally. Michigan, Iowa, Ohio State, Wisconsin, the next 4, and perhaps not so coincidentally, all those teams finished last year with winning records. Not a shock, Coach. It's important to be good up front. We've been doing the Big 5, the countdowns, top 5 lists here in the Big Ten as we get ready for the season. We're going to do defensive lines today using the sacks as a jumping off point. So let's get right into it. Number 5, where are you starting?
Yeah, I'm going to start with Michigan. And I'll tell you, defensive line, to play great defense, it all starts up front. Everybody says that. And I think that relates to rushing defense. Last year, Michigan was as good as anybody in the country stopping the run. We talked about Penn State leading the Big Ten in sacks, but I think Michigan has done a good job recruiting. I mean, yes, Mike Morris, we're going to miss Mike Morris. We're going to miss Mozzie Smith, right? #1 pick by the Dallas Cowboys. Jenkins will take his place. They got high hopes for the Mason Graham kid, who was a true freshman last year, and they've recruited well. So I don't see them really. They're not blitzing like they used to in the past, so they're a little bit more conservative. They put a little bit more pressure on the defense, and then you throw in McGregor and Harrell at the edge rushers. They call them edge rushers. To me, they're just defensive ends.
Yeah.
Please, it sounds good in the clinic. But that's what they are. And then they recruit the Stewart kid from Coastal Carolina.
Yeah, Josiah Stewart.
15 and a half sacks or whatever in 2 years, 25 and a half tackles for loss. I know it's a lower level of football, but that gives them good depth, and it gives you a chance to rotate these guys and keep them fresh.
A lot of good bodies. As you said, Chris Jenkins is one who everyone is just raving about in camp, so maybe poised to have a huge year for them. So Michigan starts the list at number 5. Who's number 4?
I'm going to go with Ohio State, and I think I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt because of the talent. And, they very easily could jump to the top of the pack, 4 or 5-star recruits. We haven't seen anyone have the Chase Young year. Right. You would like to think so. So I think, to me, when I look at Ohio State, I'm going to put them second. They do a little bit with Jim Knowles as a coordinator, a little bit more pressure. We know that. But they got 3 of their top 4 pass rushers back from a year ago. So I think with Sawyer, I'm just looking here, JTT, Mike Hall, they've all been banged up a little bit and a little bit inconsistent, Rever. So when I look at Ohio State, I say, hey, they've got the talent there. We just got to get, full seasons out of these guys playing at a high level, and they very easily could jump to the top.
One thing I thought was interesting, I do think there's been kind of a shift, and you could speak to this much more than I could, but there's been a shift in mentality where people talk about, do you affect the quarterback, right? Like, even if you don't get the sack. They were 3rd in the nation in the percentage of dropbacks last year where the quarterback was affected, where they got pressure on the QB. And that speaks to, even if you're not putting him on the ground, that speaks to having success there.
100%. Buddy Ryan, back in the days when he was with the Bears, I remember sitting down talking to him about the Bears 46 defense, and he said, Dave, every time that quarterback drops back, just what you're saying, Rever, if in the back of his mind he's not thinking, I could get hit.
Right.
then you got no chance as a defensive line. So absolutely, Ohio State, they've got the players to do that.
Who's number 3?
I'm going to go with Iowa, and I'll tell you, I'm looking at them and second in the country stopping the run, less than 3 yards a carry. That's hard to do. It truly is.
Yeah.
And these guys year in and year out do a great job. You got Shannon, you got Lee, you got Evans, you got Graves. I mean, they've got guys coming back as a group that, in my opinion, and think about their offense last year. These guys are under a lot of stress. If they gave up if they gave up a play on defense, there was a chance they weren't going to win because they struggled. Now put Cade McNamara in there, and I'm putting this out there because if McNamara can make a difference with the offense, I think now all of a sudden, we score some points. We got a lead. That's what great defensive linemen, that's how they're made. Now we can go and we can get after guys. And all of a sudden, this defensive line just blossoms. Well, they had the talent, but they never had a lead. It was always a one-score game, back and forth, and it's tough to turn defensive linemen loose in that situation. If the offense is better, this defensive line right here could be as good as any of them.
That's pretty amazing. You give up 4 rushing touchdowns in a season? In a season? Teams are giving that up routinely in a game.
Absolutely.
They give up in a season. So they're number 3. What do you got for number 2?
I'm going with Illinois. We know led the country in scoring defense, third in third down defense, led the nation in interceptions. Back to your opening point. You lead the country in interceptions. Well, how does that happen? Because pressure. As great as the corners were at Illinois, I'm not taking anything away from there. And they've got a good group coming back, the Randall, Newton, Coleman. So they've got a good group coming back. They've had some good transfers in. And I think the reason, because I've been to Brent Bielema's practices, and Brent played defensive line. And it's always that way. The head coach, his baby, Kurt Ferentz, what's Kurt's expertise? Offensive line. Right. He's always spending time. He's making sure that he's got enough players in that area to be good, because that's his baby. Well, that's kind of how I think the defensive line has gone since Brent Bielema's there. So they've got good depth. They're going to be coached well, and I look for these guys not to miss a beat.
You're not going to find a better tandem of tackles in the country than Newton and Randolph. I mean,
No.
You have 2 all-American caliber defensive tackles. Those guys are hard to find. It's pretty amazing.
Absolutely.
That Brett Bielema ends up with 2 of them in just his 3rd year in Illinois, and that he had them there.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. And when you win, everybody wants to be associated with a winner. And they're looking at this defense. You walk in, you want to play in a top defense in the country, you come with us.
So who's number 1?
Number 1 for me is Penn State. And I'm saying that not just because of the sacks, but I think Manny Diaz, the defensive coordinator, last year was his first year. They run that 4-3 defense. Second year now in the system. He likes to rotate guys. We were talking earlier, keep guys fresh. I mean, Chop Robinson, obviously the top guy. They talk about his sacks. He could be a first-round draft pick. There's no question about that. And you got Sutton, who was a big freshman guy. You got Isaac. I mean, to me, they've got the talent right now. They kind of got a little bit of mojo with them. A lot of confidence in them. And I don't know, I went with them. I mean, they got 19. They led the league in sacks. We saw the graphic up there. They got half of those sacks back with these guys right here, so it's not like they graduated everybody. So the numbers, I think, support tackles for loss. I think they were 4th in the nation last year with tackles for loss. That's run stuff. That's not sacks in passing. So if you can be in the top 10 in sacks and you can be in the top 10 in tackles for loss, that's a complete defensive line. That's stopping the run and stopping the pass. That's why I got them as number 1.
Yeah, absolutely. And when teams did get the passes off, they had a really hard time completing them, in the top 5 in the country in terms of defensive completion percentage allowed. So there's a lot to like there. I'd said this when we were at camp, like if Dennis Sutton is your 3rd guy among pass rushers, I'm telling you, Coach, he's really something. He was fun to watch at camp. So that is a loaded group. Ohio State set to debut a new starting quarterback, either Kyle McCord or Devin Brown. It's an area where Ryan Day has a good track record, to say the least. Since he took over as co-offensive coordinator and QB coach in 2017, the Bucs have had 3 new starters, C.J. Stroud, Justin Fields, and the late Dwayne Haskins, combined to throw 135 TDs and 17 interceptions in their debut seasons. Here's Day on where things stand with the top 2 this year.
As honestly as I could say it, there's not one that have won the job. There's not one that's lost the job. There's been times over this camp where I felt like one was going to take over and the other one came back. It was like a horse race, and they just kept pulling away, and then the other one would catch up. I asked the staff this weekend after the scrimmage. I just took a straw poll, and it was almost split right down the middle. So what does that mean? Well, I think that it's going to continue to go on this week, and we'll go from there.
So no starter yet here, Wani. How does this impact everyone involved?
Well, Ryan knows what he's doing. I'm a defensive guy. If you got 2 quarterbacks, that tells me you got none. That's what scares me when you don't make a decision at this point. But I remember hearing Nick Saban talk after he was having the Jalen Hurts Tua conversation at Alabama, and he says, well, I didn't want to make a decision too early. I kind of knew, but, with the transfer portal nowadays, if a kid doesn't think he's going to play, he could leave. So I think there's a little bit of that generally in college football at all positions going on. Ryan Day knows what he's been doing. He's been through this before. The toughest thing is your quarterback. You don't want to split the reps exactly in half because you want your best receivers with one guy. You don't want one guy with the backups and the other guy with the starters. And so that's not fair. So do you minimize their work? Well, no, we don't want to minimize their work. We want them both getting the equal amount of reps. And the second thing is personalities. How is each personality, and they're each going to have their friends, regardless of their personality. So you don't want to split locker room. And, those are all just little things that Ryan's going to have to deal with. Well, they're going to say, okay, he's the guy. Hopefully, usually it takes care of itself, and it's on the tape. It's, this guy's completing these passes, and he's not completing them. It's an easy decision for the coach and everybody who rallies around him. But if it's as close as what Ryan's saying, they might play them both. They could really play them both early on and let game decisions, because of no preseason games. We were talking earlier, let game decisions separate them.
And you have a new offensive coordinator in Brian Hartline as well. So there's a lot of interesting moving pieces there. I think a lot of people would say, I would trade places with Ryan Day, partly because whoever the quarterback is throwing to 2 All-American wide receivers. This is the AP All-American list, came out yesterday. 10 first-teamers, Penn State, Iowa, Michigan, each with a pair. The Buckeyes, though, have 3, Tommy Eichenberg on defense, and then the star wideouts, Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka. That wide receiver duo, as we look at some of our talent duos in the Big Ten, let's start there. That is a nice luxury, and I would think it puts a little less pressure on that decision. It
does, and interesting now, Brian Hartline, he's the offensive coordinator, so they're going to get their catches. Don't worry, guys.
Right.
I'm the coordinator, your coach. You're going to get the ball, so that's not going to be a problem. And an awful lot of talent. They're both a little bit different. But they will find ways to use them. They always have, and that's dangerous because they can make the easy throw, the short throw, the high percentage throw into a big play. That's what you have when you got players like Egbuka and Harrison Jr.
And Julian Fleming, who's no slouch, and you've got Cade Stover, who's an outstanding tight end. So it is, and 2 great running backs. I mean, the list kind of goes on and on. So there's a ton of talent there, no doubt. Speaking of outstanding running backs, and we were talking about duos, I'm fascinated by how you would handle what's going on at Michigan. Again, this falls in the category of nice problems to have, but you got Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards. You have only one football. Right. You have 2 running backs who, if they were alone in the backfield, no doubt could be an All-American. Corum already is an All-American. I think Edwards is of that same caliber. How do you handle this as a head coach?
Well, they came back for a reason. Corum came back, he was the guy nationally. He was a Heisman candidate a year ago. We all know that. So, I mean, you need, if you're going to run the football, which Jim is, you need a couple great ones. That showed up last year. Edwards actually started off the season a little banged up, if I remember, last year. So he was slow to get started, and Corum took the bulk of the work. And then when he got hurt, it was Edwards' turn. So, you know, I don't think running the ball and splitting time with these backs is going to be a problem, except that now you got a Heisman candidate at quarterback, J.J. McCarthy, who wants to throw the ball. So really, and when you think about it, we got to be balanced, guys. This cannot be 3 plays in a cloud of dust type of offense. So, you know, if we run the ball 25, 30 carries, you're each going to get 10 or 15. Maybe they use one on third down a little bit more, and the other one's a little more first and second. Maybe they put them both in the backfield at the same time. You know, the Green Bay Packers do that today in the NFL. Two good backs, put them both in the game at the same time. I could see Jim doing some of that stuff.
It's interesting when you have one running back who, as you said, was a Heisman contender, may have been a Heisman leader until he got hurt at the end of last year, and then the second guy led the Big Ten in yards per carry. I mean, again, it's just unusual to have 2 players that good at one position. Iowa has it as well, though, at tight end. When we were there last week, Luke Lachey had an incredible day. But I'll tell you, when we came out of camp last year, Howard said he thought Eric All was the most talented tight end in the Big Ten. And so now you have Eric All and Luke Lachey together on one team. Can your tight ends be the feature of your offense? Like, is there a way to do that with an offense?
I would like to say no, you know, but here they are with a quarterback. We're talking about J.J. McCarthy. They got Cade McNamara now. So now they've got a legitimate big-time quarterback. Kirk Ferentz, you know, is got to be excited. They've won playing conservative, you know, having their tight end be their leading receiver like he was last year. They've done that in the past. The receivers have not been a major part of it. I don't know if Kurt and his son, Brian, I don't know if they changed philosophies. I think you got 2 good tight ends. They'll probably find ways to use them, run the ball, the play action, play great defense. I don't see them changing philosophy, but I do think when you got talent like this, all of a sudden you get more big plays. You know what I mean? And maybe you put the defense. I mean, I can tell this from defending it. You got 2 tight ends in the game, and these guys are both athletic enough. You move one out, now it's a mismatch for a safety, can't cover him. Can your linebacker, is he athletic enough? So everybody says, oh, 2 tight ends, it's conservative. It's really not. If you use them wisely, you can put yourself in some very advantageous positions against the defense. And I think that's what they'll do.
All about matchups.
All about matchups, and you got to get your best players on the field. Yeah. So Kurt Ferentz is in there right now saying, okay, this is our top 20 offensive players. Now let's number them from best player, I don't care the position, if it's a center, best player to worst player of the top 20, these guys are going to be in the top 10. So you got to get them on the field.
Might be in the top 3.
Might be in the top 3.
They're both really good. Future Big Ten member Washington in the hunt for a new athletic director because Jen Cohen left Seattle to take the same job at another future Big Ten school, USC, yesterday. Cohen is the school's first ever female AD, a homecoming of sorts for her. She's from Arcadia, California, just east of Pasadena. Cohen addressed the media yesterday about her new position.
This is extra special for me and very meaningful to come back to my original roots, to lead a storied and iconic athletic program at one of the most prestigious universities in the world. 25 years in college sports, all the coaches and administrators are here, you know, so that's a long run. To be able to do that and to make so many memories and create so many special accomplishments together. And so UW is always going to have a very special place in my heart, except for any time they play the Trojans.
Well, we're on the topic of changing schools. Of course, the portal and immediate eligibility is such a huge part of college football. I know you wanted to focus at the end on Indiana. 23 players coming out of the portal. There's an infusion of talent there, no doubt. It's a top 20 portal class nationally. But what's the challenge here of integrating those new faces?
Yeah, it's not. That's about 10 more than anybody else in the Big Ten. It's not Deion Sanders in 68.
No.
68 at Colorado. Think of that. But, you know, the challenge is obviously the personalities, the guys that were here, that were Indiana players, that came here because they wanted to be a Hoosier. You know, they're committed to their school, their state, and now you start bringing too many guys in from the outside, and the influence, in the love, the school. That's a concern to me.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's interesting, and that's the challenge, right? The challenge is, can you build a team and can you get guys to buy in right away? And I think that's, every coach is dealing with that.
If they can find a Kenneth Walker III, they're in good shape.
Yeah, right.
Easy, touchdown.
Yeah, easier said than done, I suppose. Always fun, looking forward to the season. Dave Wannstedst, I'm Dave Revson. Have a good one.